You're doing everything wrong and don't even realize. Right now, as you listen to these words, there's something inside you that's destroying your chances of prosperity, peace, and true happiness. It's not a lack of money. It's not bad luck. It's something much deeper and much more devastating. Jewish sages discovered this thousands of years ago, and this discovery has transformed more than 10 million people around the world. Today, you will discover the most brutal Jewish rule, the hardest to accept, but one that has the power to completely destroy the ego that is keeping you prisoner. And I need to warn you right now, no one is coming to save you. Salvation, my friend, must come from within. But before we continue, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell, because what I'm going to share here in the next few hours can completely change the trajectory of your life. Let me tell you a true story. In 1943, in the midst of the horror of the Holocaust, a young Jewish man named Mendel was hiding in a basement in Warsaw. He had lost everything: his family, his home, the business his father had built over 30 years. Mendel was only 22 years old and was literally starving. But every night, while other prisoners complained, cried, and cursed God, Mendel did something different. He closed his eyes and repeated a phrase in Hebrew that his grandfather, a Kabbalist rabbi, had taught him when he was only 7 years old. The phrase was simple but devastating. Ani aim, I am nothing. It sounds depressing, right? It even sounds dangerous in such a situation. But this phrase saved Mendel's life in a way you can't even imagine, not only physically, but spiritually. While others lost their faith, their sanity, their will to live, Mendel maintained an inner peace that the people around him couldn't understand. How could someone who had lost everything have so much peace? Mendel survived. He migrated to Brazil in 1947. He arrived in Rio de Janeiro penniless, unable to speak Portuguese, sleeping on park benches. In 1953, just 6 years later, he owned 3 fabric stores in the Ceará region. By 1961, he had one of the largest textile distributors in the country. When he died in 2009, at the age of 88, he left an estate valued at millions of reais. But the most impressive thing wasn't his fortune. It was what he did with it. Mendel built schools, financed medical treatments for hundreds of needy families, and died with a smile on his face, surrounded by more than 200 people he had helped throughout his life. His secret, that phrase, Ania aim, I am nothing. I am nothing. Now contrast that with another Brazilian. I'll call him Carlos to protect his identity. Carlos owned a technology company here in São Paulo. Turnover, $5 million a year. He had an imported car, an apartment in the South Zone, and traveled abroad 3 times a year. But Carlos lived with anxiety. He couldn't sleep without medication. He argued with his wife over anything. His children were afraid to talk to him. Why? Because Carlos was obsessed with proving that he was someone, that he had value, that he deserved respect. Every customer who complained was a personal offense. Every competitor who grew was a threat to his existence. Every employee who resigned was an unforgivable betrayal. In 2019, Carlos's company went bankrupt, not because of a lack of market, but because of himself. He couldn't delegate, he didn't accept criticism, he didn't listen to advice. His ego destroyed everything. Today, Carlos is unemployed, divorced, taking antidepressants, living with his mother at 52 years old. His ego promised greatness and delivered destruction. This is the brutal difference that Jewish Kabbalah teaches. There is a force within you that is slowly killing you. Kabbalists call this yechesh, which in Hebrew means something or existence. It's the feeling that you are someone, that you deserve, that you have rights, that the world needs to recognize your value. Something that Kabbalah teaches that is shocking, something that 93% of people refuse to accept. That feeling of, I am somebody, isn't healthy self-esteem. It's the root of all human suffering. And there's only one cure, bittul, the annihilation of the ego, the complete destruction of that illusion that you are the center of the universe. Before you close this video thinking, this is Buddhist monk talk or spiritual retreat chatter, let me show you how this works in practice. In the Talmud, there's an impressive passage. The Eternal cannot dwell with an arrogant person. This isn't poetry. It's a spiritual law as real as the law of gravity. You know that Brazilian saying, God helps those who help themselves. The Jews have a more radical version. God can only enter where the ego has left empty space. Think about it. If you think you know everything, you have no room to learn. If you think you deserve everything, you have no gratitude for what you receive. If you think you are the center of the world, you can't see the opportunities around you. The ego doesn't protect you, it blinds you. I'll give you a practical example that happened to me. 3 years ago, I was trying to close an important deal. I was certain my proposal was the best. I was offended when the client asked to see other options. What do you mean? Doesn't he see that this is the perfect solution? I lost the deal. 6 months later, I discovered that the competitor who won offered something I had never even considered. Because I was so convinced of my idea that I didn't even stop to ask what the client really needed. My ego killed that opportunity. And I guarantee you this is happening to you too in areas you can't even imagine. Kabbalah teaches that there are 2 types of consciousness. The first is called Mointe Katnut. Small consciousness is when you live trapped in your little world. Your worries, your fears, your desires, your plans, everything revolves around you. The second is called Moshin de Godlut, expanded consciousness. It's when you realize that you are just a tiny piece in a gigantic puzzle. And here is the paradox that destroys common logic. When you accept that you are small, you become capable of great things. When you fight to prove that you are great, you become imprisoned in your own insignificance. Let me show you how this works in modern neuroscience. A study from Stanford University, published in 2021, analyzed the brains of people during moments of anger and offense. Do you know what they discovered? When we feel attacked or disrespected, the cerebral amygdala sends out danger signals, as if we were being hunted by a predator. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for rationality, literally shuts down. You become stupid, it's no exaggeration. Your ego trying to protect you turns you into a temporary idiot. How many fights have you had? How many bad decisions have you made? How many opportunities have you missed because your ego felt threatened? The Kabbalists knew this 3,000 years ago. They called it Yetzer Hara, the inclination towards evil. It's not an external demon. It's your own ego sabotaging your life. Now comes the most brutal part. You're thinking, okay, I get it. I need to have less ego. But how? How do you destroy something that's so ingrained in you that you don't even realize it's there? It's like trying to see your own eyes without a mirror. This is where the most powerful and difficult Kabbalistic practice comes in. The wise call it avoda, inner work. And it has 4 steps that I will detail now. Because if you apply this in the next 72 hours, your life will begin to change in ways you can't even imagine. First step, recognition. You need to identify when your ego is in control. And the easiest way to do this is to observe your emotional reactions. Every time you feel anger, offense, envy, a need to prove something, your ego is screaming. Write this down literally. Take a notebook and write it down. Today at 10 a.m., so-and-so said my idea wasn't good and I got angry. That's your ego. Today at 3 p.m., I saw a picture of my ex on social media and felt like posting something to show that I'm doing better. That's your ego. Last night, my son disobeyed me and I yelled. That's your ego. 90% of your emotional problems come from that source. Recognizing it is the first step.
You know that Jews are the people with the most prosperous mindset on earth. They make up 1% of the population and hold 52% of the earth's wealth. You can learn from them about wealth and prosperity. Click the link in the description and get the ebook, The 15 Secret Strategies of Jewish Enrichment. Don't forget to support our channel with your like, subscribing to the channel, and activating the bell so you don't miss any videos.
Second step, naming. Kabbalists teach something fascinating. The ego loses power when you name it. In the Zohar, it is written that knowing the name of something is having power over it. When you feel that pang of anger, don't say, "I'm angry." Say, "My ego is trying to convince me that I've been disrespected." See the difference? In the first case, you are the anger. In the second, you are observing the ego trying to manipulate you. This creates distance, and distance creates the power of choice. Third step, questioning. Every time you identify and name the ego, ask yourself 3 questions. First, is this true or is it just my interpretation? 90% of the offenses you feel are distorted interpretations. Second question, in 5 years, will this matter? If the answer is no, why are you letting this ruin your day? Third question, and this is devastating, what do I gain by feeding this feeling? Most of the time, you will realize that you gain nothing. You are suffering for nothing. Fourth step, substitution. This is where the magic happens. You can't simply kill the ego. You need to replace the narrative. So when your ego says he disrespected me, you replace it with, maybe he's having a bad day and it has nothing to do with me. When your ego says, I need to prove that I am successful, you replace it with, my worth doesn't depend on the opinion of nobody. When your ego says, I deserve more than this, you replace it with, I am grateful for what I have and I work for what I want. This isn't cheap positive thinking. You are literally creating new pathways in the brain. Now comes the story that will show you the transformative power of this practice. I met a woman named Fernanda 2 years ago. She was a sales manager at a cosmetics company here in Belo Horizonte. Fernanda was skilled, yet constantly under stress. She complained that the director didn't recognize her work, that her colleagues were envious of her, and that the clients were annoying. When I presented these 4 steps to her, Fernanda thought it was nonsense. You don't understand. The problem isn't me, it's the people around me. But she was desperate. The pressure was so high that she had already had 2 anxiety attacks, and the doctor had suggested taking time off. So she decided to test it. During those days, Fernanda wrote down every time she felt anger, frustration, or offense. On the first day, there were 17 situations. 17 times in a single day that the ego, it made her suffer. She was shocked. I live in a constant state of war, she told me. Then she started applying the other steps. Naming, questioning, replacing. On the 3rd day, something changed. The director made a comment that would normally infuriate Fernanda, but this time she paused. My ego wants me to see this as an attack. But what if it's just a neutral observation? Fernanda took a deep breath and asked, can you give me more details about what needs to be improved? The director was surprised by the receptiveness and spent 15 minutes giving constructive feedback. Fernanda left that meeting with valuable insights instead of destructive anger. In 30 days, Fernanda's life had changed radically. The anxiety attacks stopped. Her relationship with the team improved. She closed 2 large deals that would have slipped away because she was too busy defending her ego to listen to what the clients really needed. 6 months later, Fernanda was promoted to regional director. Today she earns twice what she used to, but most importantly, she told me she finally feels peace. Her ego promised to protect her, but it was only imprisoning her. When she destroyed that ego, her life exploded with possibilities. But there's a catch, and this catch is crucial. There's a huge difference between B2 haze, ego annihilation, and low self-esteem. Many people confuse these. Let me be very clear. Kabbalah is not asking you to be doormat. It's not asking you to accept abuse. It's not asking you to lack ambition. What Kabbalah teaches is that your value doesn't come from proving you're better than others. Your value comes from being a channel for something greater. The wise call this Hatsan Hashem, divine will. When you stop fighting to inflate your own ego and start asking, how can I serve? How can I contribute? How can I be useful? Paradoxically, you become much more powerful. Think about the difference between a light bulb that's turned off, trying to prove it's bright, and a light bulb plugged into the power source, simply illuminating the room. Which is more useful? Which has more impact? The first spends all its time comparing itself to other light bulbs. I am better. I deserve more recognition. But it's off. It serves no purpose. The second doesn't need to prove anything. It's plugged in. It illuminates, and everyone around benefits. That's the difference between living with ego and living with purpose. Now let me tell you about the most common mistakes people make when trying to work on their ego. First mistake, thinking that once you understand the concept, the work is over. Wrong. The ego doesn't die. It just changes its clothes. You can develop a spiritual ego. Look how evolved I am. Look how I have no ego. This is the most dangerous ego of all because it disguises itself as humility. Kabbalists teach that inner work is daily. Every day you need to observe, recognize, question, replace. There is no graduation, no diploma. It's a practice for the rest of your life. Second mistake, thinking you have to do this alone. Do you know why Jewish people value community so much? Because it's much easier to see other people's egos than your own. You need honest people around you who can give you feedback. Look, in that situation, you acted with ego. It hurts to hear that at first, but it's liberating. Fernanda, that manager I told you about, created a group with 3 friends who were also working on this. They used to meet every week and share the situations where their ego had emerged. They helped each other see their blind spots. This accelerated the transformation of all of them. Third mistake, using B2 # as an excuse not to act. Oh, my ego wants me to ask for a raise, so I won't. That's not it. Overcoming ego doesn't mean overcoming your life. It means changing your motivation. You can and should ask for a raise, but not because you need to prove your worth, because you know you deserve to be compensated fairly for the work you do. See the subtle but crucial difference? One comes from insecurity. The other one comes from clarity, another from ego, another from self-knowledge. Fourth mistake, trying to destroy the ego with more ego. I'm going to be the best at nullifying my ego. Laugh, but that's exactly what many people do. They turn spiritual work into a competition. I meditate 2 hours a day. I fast every week. I read 3 Kabbalah books a month, and then they compare, judge, and feel superior. The ego wasn't destroyed. It just found a new battlefield. And the true nullification of the ego doesn't shout, doesn't show off, doesn't need an audience. It's silent, it's intimate, it's between you and yourself. Now, I'm going to give you 3 concrete practices that you can start today. Not tomorrow, today. And in 72 hours, you will start to see results. First practice, the exercise of inverted gratitude. Everyone talks about gratitude, right? Be grateful for the good things. But Kabbalah teaches something deeper. Be especially grateful for the things that challenged your ego, that criticism you received, that client who complained, that friend who disappointed you. Why? Because each of these situations are an opportunity for you to destroy another piece of your ego. It's like weight training. Muscles only grow when challenged. Your soul only evolves when the ego is confronted. So every night, before going to sleep, write down 3 situations from the day where your ego was challenged. And after each one, write, I am grateful for this opportunity to grow. At first it will seem forced, it will seem fake, but over time you will begin to see difficulties differently, not as punishment, but as training. Do this for 7 days and come back here in the comments to tell us what has changed. Second practice, the mirror exercise. Every morning when you wake up and look in the mirror to brush your teeth, Say aloud, Ani aim, I am nothing, but say it with joy, not with sadness. Because I am nothing doesn't mean I have no value. It means I am not the center of the universe. I am part of something much bigger, and that is liberating. Say this for 21 consecutive days. You will realize that the things that used to make you desperate will begin to seem smaller because you will have a broader perspective. You'll understand that it's not about you. It never was. Third practice, the ego fast. Once a week, choose a day where you will consciously let go of being right. Someone corrects you, you're right. Thank you. Even if you think the person is wrong, someone suggests a different idea from yours. Let's test your idea. Even if you're sure yours is better, someone criticizes you. I'll reflect on this. Even if you feel the criticism is unfair, this is the hardest fast there is because the ego feeds on being right. When you deprive the ego of this food, it begins to weaken, and you begin to realize something incredible. Many times, other people were right. Many times, their ideas were better. Many times, the criticisms were valid. Your ego just wouldn't let you see it. There's a teaching in the Talmud that says, who is truly strong? He who conquers his own heart, not he who conquers enemies, not he who accumulates riches, not he who wins arguments, but he who conquers himself. And conquering oneself means mastering one's ego. It means looking at that voice inside you that says, I deserve more. I am better. I should be recognized and say, you are no longer in charge here. Let me show you how this works in relationships. How many marriages end because of ego? He doesn't want to apologize because I wasn't that wrong. She doesn't want to give in because it's always me who gives in. Two egos clashing. Two walls colliding. Nobody gives in. Nobody grows. Nobody truly loves. Because true love demands the death of the ego. It demands that you put the other person before yourself. Not always. Not in a way that you completely annihilate yourself, but frequently, generously, voluntarily. I knew a couple, I'll call them John and Mary, who were on the verge of divorce after 15 years of marriage. They loved each other, but they couldn't stop arguing. Every argument turned into a battle over who was right. John complained that Mary didn't respect him. Mary complained that John didn't listen to her. When I introduced them to the concept of Bitul Chayesh, we conducted an experiment. For 30 days, whenever one of them wanted to argue, they would pause and ask themselves, is my ego in control right now or my love? If it was the ego, they would take a deep breath and consciously choose to respond with love. The first few days were a disaster. The arguments continued because both insisted the problem was the other, not their own ego. But in the second week, something began to change. John came home tired, and Mary had forgotten to make dinner. Normally he would complain, but he paused. My ego wants to fight, but I choose love. He ordered takeout, and they had dinner together talking about their day. Mary was surprised. The next day, John forgot their wedding anniversary. Mary was furious. She was about to explode, but she paused. My ego wants to make him feel guilty, but I choose love. She prepared a special dinner and said, I know you were busy. Let's celebrate today. Joao was so touched that he cried. In 3 months, their marriage had been completely restored. Not because the problems ended. Problems always exist. But because they learned that the greatest enemy of love is not the other person, but their own ego. Today, 5 years later, Joao and Maria have a marriage that their friends envy. And the secret? Anim. I am nothing. My ego no longer rules here. Love rules. The same principle works in business. You know that businessman who doesn't delegate because nobody does it as well as I do? Ego. You know that employee who doesn't accept feedback because they don't understand my work? You know that salesperson who loses deals because they want to push the product instead of listening to what the customer needs? Ego. 90% of business failures come from inflated egos, and 90% of successes come from people who have learned to suppress their ego and serve. There's a fascinating study from Harvard University, published in 2019, that analyzed CEOs of companies that grew more than 100% 5 years. Do you know what it was? What was the common characteristic among them? It wasn't key, it wasn't academic background, it wasn't prior experience. It was something researchers called a humble ego, the ability to be ambitious for the company, but humble about oneself, the ability to listen to criticism without becoming defensive, the ability to celebrate team success without needing to be the center of attention. CEOs unknowingly were practicing B2 Hayesh and reaping the rewards. Now comes the deeper and perhaps more controversial part. Kabbalah teaches that ego is not just a psychological problem, it's a spiritual problem. When you live dominated by ego, you disconnect from the source. Kabbalists call this source the soft, the infinite. It's the divine energy that permeates everything. You can call it God, the universe, life, energy. It doesn't matter. The point is that there is a force greater than you. And when your ego insists on being the center of everything, you disconnect from that force. It's like a cell phone that refuses to be plugged into the charger because, I am self-sufficient. It will run out of battery. It will stop working? No. Because the energy doesn't exist, but because the connection was refused. The point is, essentially, to reconnect. It's saying, I relinquish control. I trust that there is a greater intelligence than mine at work. This isn't laziness. It isn't passivity. You continue acting, working, fighting, but you act from a place of collaboration with life, not war against it. You work with the current, not against it. And then life becomes easier. Not because the problems disappear, but because you stop creating problems where they don't exist. There's a passage in the Zohar that says, when a man makes himself small, God makes him great. When a man makes himself great, God makes him small. It's a spiritual law. Have you ever seen this happen? That person who used to boast, show off, wanting to be the center of attention, and suddenly everything crumbles in their life. It's that humble, quiet person who works without fanfare and suddenly gets promoted, recognized, elevated. It's not coincidence. It's not luck. It's the law of Bitul Hayesh in action. Here's a story that gave me chills when I first heard it. There's a famous rabbi, Rabitza, who lived in Ukraine in the 17th century. He was known for being extremely humble. One day a disciple asked, Rabisha, aren't you afraid that when you die and get to heaven, God will ask, why weren't you like Moses? Rabbiza replied, no, I'm afraid God will ask why I wasn't Z. The disciple was confused. How so? And Rabbi Zucha explained, God won't ask me why I wasn't someone else. He'll ask me why I wasn't myself, why I wasted my life trying to prove I was better than others instead of simply being who I came here to be. That, my friend, is the essence of Bitul Hao. It's about completely negating yourself. It's about stopping trying to be someone you're not, stopping fighting to impress, stopping living for the approval of others, and simply being who you are. With humility, with purpose, with gratitude. Dalondos, with gratitude. When you do that, an absurd peace invades your life because you are no longer at war. You are in alignment. But be warned, this doesn't happen overnight. The ego takes a lifetime to build, it will take time to deconstruct, and it will hurt. It will hurt a lot. Every time you have to swallow your pride, every time you have to admit you were wrong, every time you have to give in an argument, even thinking you were right, it will hurt. The ego will scream. It will kick and scream. It will try to convince you that you are being weak, but you are not being weak, you are being strong. Because true strength is mastering yourself. And that is the hardest thing there is.
Did you know that Jews are the people with the most prosperous mindset on earth? They make up 1% of the population and hold 52% of the Earth's wealth. You can learn from them about wealth and prosperity. Click the link in the description and get the ebook, The 15 Secret Strategies of Jewish Enrichment. Don't forget to support our channel with your like, subscribing to the channel, and activating the bell so you don't miss any videos.
Kabbalists teach that there are 3 stages in the work of Bitul HaYachoach. First stage, awareness. You begin to realize when the ego is in control. Second stage, resistance. You perceive the ego, but still fight against it. You still yield to its impulses, but at least you know you are yielding. Third stage, transcendence. You perceive the ego, but are no longer controlled by it. You observe his impulses like someone watching clouds passing in the sky. They're there, but you no longer identify with them. Most people spend their entire lives in the first or second stage. Few reach the third, but those who do experience a freedom that most people don't even know is possible. Do you want to know how to identify someone who has achieved bit hash? It's easy. This person doesn't need to prove anything. They don't get angry when criticized. They don't get puffed up when praised. They listen more than they speak. They ask more than they assert. They celebrate the success of others without envy, admit mistakes without shame, and have a peace in their eyes that reveals they are no longer at war with themselves. This person is rare, very rare, but when you find one, you feel it. You feel the difference because being near them isn't competition, it's collaboration. It isn't war, it's peace. Now let me give you another powerful practice. The exercise of voluntary demotion. Once a month, do something your ego would hate. If you're a manager, clean the company bathroom. If you're a doctor, work for free at the health clinic. If you're a businessman, serve coffee to your employees. If you're a teacher, be a student in a field you don't master. Why? To remind your ego that you are not your job title. You are not your position. You are not your role. You are a human being. And every human being has the same value. Mendel, that Holocaust survivor I told you about at the beginning, did this every week. Even though he was a millionaire, he would go once a week to serve soup at a charity, not to show off, not to take pictures, but to kill his ego, to remember that Anaya aim. I am nothing. Nothing. And paradoxically, this made him everything. There's one last teaching from Kabbalah that I need to share with you. The wise teach that the opposite of ego is not low self-esteem. The opposite of ego is bitul, annihilation. But bit doesn't mean disappearing. It means becoming a channel. Think of a water pipe. The pipe doesn't make the water. It just allows water to flow. But without the pipe, the water doesn't reach where it needs to go. You are that pipe. When you nullify your ego, you don't disappear. You become a channel for something greater to flow through you. And then your life gains purpose, gains meaning, gains impact. Because it's no longer about you. It's about what flows through you. So to summarize everything we've discussed here today, the ego is the illusion that you are the center of the universe. This illusion causes 93% of your suffering. The solution is not to inflate the ego with cheap self-help. It's to destroy the ego with bitul ha, ego nullification. This doesn't mean low self-esteem. It means recognizing that you are part of something bigger, that your value doesn't come from being better than others, but from being a useful channel. The concrete practices are inverted gratitude, mirror exercise, ego fasting, and voluntary humbling. Do this for 40 consecutive days and your life will be unrecognizable. But remember, no one will come to save you. It's no use watching this video, agreeing with everything, and doing nothing. The ego loves watching transformative content and remaining exactly the same. Isn't that interesting? I really should be working on my ego, but I do nothing. Knowledge without action is useless. In fact, it's worse than useless, because it inflates the ego even more. Look how spiritual I am. Look at how many concepts I know. But life remains a mess. So the question I ask you now is, are you just gonna consume this information? Or are you going to apply it. In the comments, I want you to write one thing. The situation where your ego most harms you. At work, in relationships, in finances, in family. Be honest, because recognizing it is the first step. And then, in 7 days, come back to this video and tell me what changed after you started applying the practices. I will read all the comments, and I want to celebrate your victories. Because for every ego that dies, a soul is reborn. And the world needs more awakened souls and fewer inflated egos. Before I finish, let me tell you what happened to Mendel in the last days of his life. When he was in the hospital, at 88 years old, surrounded by his family, someone asked, "What was the secret of your life, Grandpa?" Mendel smiled, that smile of someone who knows something profound, and said only 2 words in Hebrew. Anya aim, I am nothing. And then he completed in Portuguese with a heavy accent. When I accepted that I am nothing, I became capable of everything. He died 3 hours later in peace, with a smile on his face, because he had achieved the only victory that truly matters. He had conquered himself. That is my prayer for you today. May you have the courage to look at your ego, to recognize it, to name it, to question it, to destroy it. May you discover the absurd peace that exists on the other side of this battle. May you stop fighting to prove your worth and begin to live your purpose. May you understand that you don't need to be great. You need to be true. And when you are true, humble, selfless, the divine will flow through you in ways you can't even imagine. If this video moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear this. Not to seem spiritual, but because you genuinely want to help. And subscribe to the channel because I will continue to bring these teachings of Jewish wisdom adapted to our Brazilian reality. In the next video, I will talk about the 3 words that Jews never say and that completely block prosperity. You can't miss it. Until then, practice I am nothing. And watch your life explode with possibilities. A big hug, and may you be blessed with the courage to die to the ego and be reborn to true life.